Fasan, good afternoon, everyone. Sangeli, how are you all? I hope you're doing well. We're going to have a great conversation this afternoon. And when Charlotte Buchanan Yale, the director of the museum here, said, Dan, we want to do Indigenuity 2.0 as a theme this year for the fall semester, for the fall celebration, I think in academic terms, saying semester here. For their fall cultural celebration, I said, great, but I said, if we're going to do that, I've got 3 young scholars, indigenous scholars, I want to make sure you can get here and be a part of this conversation. And she said, no problem, we're going to get them here. So, to my immediate right, let me introduce you to Dr. Paulette Blanchard. Paulette has just joined the Rising Voices Changing Coast Research Hub project, which I'm sorry, I can't take responsibility for this, but I'm sure so happy that it's happened. NSF has funded a $20 million research hub to be housed at Haskell Indian Nations University in Lawrence, Kansas, to look at the impact of climate change on all of our indigenous relatives living on coastlines. Dr. Blanchard is one of the co-Is, that's a co-investigator on this NSF grant, and she's got the best job in the world. She's going to be working with folks like you, working with students to get them engaged, to be our future climate scientists, and also indigenous knowledge holders. So our research hub is one of a kind. It's the first research hub where they've said, we are going to fund you to explicitly include indigenous, traditional, ecological knowledges in climate science. So I'm really excited about that. And Dr. Blanchard is one of the co-Is. Next is Dr. Michelle Montgomery. And I was teasing her because I know she's up in the Northwest. I said, well, where are you hanging your hat? She said, well, I'm at the University of Washington. And she says, but all of my work's between Tacoma and Seattle. And Michelle, yeah, absolutely. And Michelle works with indigenous peoples there, Coast Salish peoples there, exactly between, roughly Tacoma, Washington, and Seattle. And there's a lot of indigenous peoples up on the Northwest coast. And not last but not least is my Muskogee relative, Patrick Freeland. Patrick is an adjunct currently at Cherokee Nation College in Oklahoma, and he has just accepted a position to work as one of our, in partnership with another person, to be our grant coordinator on this large grant. So this is a major undertaking, and Michelle's involved, Paulette's involved, Patrick's involved, and they're involved because of the incredible knowledge and passion they bring to their work. So this is a discussion I've been wanting to have forever and share with the world because, their work embodies this idea that, being indigenous isn't about the past. It's about right here, it's about right now, it's about how we apply our indigenous knowledge and wisdom to solve very modern problems, most of which we didn't have anything to do with. So, we're just going to have a conversation. I don't even know where it's going to go, but I know it's going to be fun, okay? So, all 3 of these folks have worked on environmental issues. And so what I'm going to just throw out is a very, and you might be surprised how this conversation goes, because environment, in our way of thinking, is about everything. Maybe we'll talk about governance and social organization. Maybe we'll talk about values and beliefs and virtues. Maybe we'll talk about the physical earth and things we can do, and the plants and the animals. I don't know where it's going to go. But here's the question I'm going to ask. And I don't know who wants to start it. So for those who maybe aren't familiar with the term TEK, traditional ecological, I always use the plural, knowledges, because every nation, tribe has their own knowledges, or sometimes it's called IK, indigenous knowledges. I'd like to ask each of you to kind of take a shot at how you understand that when people use that settler terminology to refer to our wisdom and knowledge. So the floor is open. I don't know who wants to go first.
I'll jump.
Okay. All right.
Hakihu Hawisi Lasamamo, Paulette Hetesito. I greet you in Shawnee and tell you my name is Paulette. I'm absentee Shawnee from Little Axe, Oklahoma. I think when we talk about indigenous knowledge, I think to make it in lay terms, the most easily understand terminology is deep place knowledge. It's knowing the rivers that are close to your home. It's knowing the mountains that are close to your home. It's knowing the plants and the animals that make your place unique. It's having a deep relationship with those things, those plants, those animals, those mountains, those rivers, and having a deep understanding of the patterns that those things have and those patterns over time. Knowing the climate and how those things have changed over time, how the climate has changed over time, and know how to prepare for extremes. So I think when we talk about indigenous knowledge, I think we can all have a certain amount of it by having a deep relationship with the places that we grow up on and the places that we call home, the places that we hang out in, the places that we treasure and consider. We can even call, our favorite places, or even they might be sacred in some ways or another. And we can attach a human emotion to it in some aspects, but I think in reality, it's just having a deep understanding of the interconnectedness of the patterns of a place, be it the patterns of animals, the patterns of plants, the patterns of people, in relationship to a specific place. Would you like to elaborate?
So, Pinahipi Osio, I want to say Pilahuk Wado for bringing you and your ancestors with us today. I know that we are still navigating this new definition of normalcy, which also means we're all healing. So I want to honor that. And again, Pilahuk Wado. When I think of traditional ecological knowledges, I think of spirituality. I think the Western context in which we use words are placed in a box. And as Uncle Wildcat always reminds us, if you learn in a box, you think in a box. And so academically, PK through 12, higher education institutions, words fractionize that spirituality. So I would like to add, so about first, second grade, we, the humans, are taught not to be emotional beings. It becomes an inferior trait to have. So you fast forward to where we are now, where we're having to defend and find ways of protecting our more than human relatives and our relationships. We have to re-engage and reimagine what it means to be emotional while we're learning. And who defines from whom the meaning of learning? So when I think of traditional ecological knowledges, for me, it's a spiritual journey. It's our lived experiences, our inherent responsibilities and reciprocities to our more than human relationships. And it's geographical. It is not a pan-indigenous perspective. It's not a one-size-fits-all. And culturally, we're taught we must plant the seed. So TEK, from my perspective, I can't speak for everyone, is about planting the seed and having grace and humility of acknowledging that we're okay with planting the seed and not using that egotistical mind frame of that we're going to live to see the solution. So I'm grateful to see such a multi-diverse, multi-generational audience. The other concept when I think of TEK for me, being on a spiritual journey and that our lived experiences are very spiritual, is this whole concept of being eco-mindful. So how do we engage ourselves to be emotional from a very centered place within our hearts and work outward? And so when I think of our traditional knowledges, there's a lot of history that comes with that. There's a lot of historical trauma. So the process of learning comes with healing. So every time we navigate these spaces, I'm here with my family, and we talk about that, this is healing. Because we also have to acknowledge when we use the words traditional ecological knowledges, we have relatives and relationships that didn't have the rights to govern their voice to be here today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Ooh. So I'll introduce myself also. So Inchje, Stongo, Patrick, Austin, Freeland, Jahajef Kijos, Mera Ligera, Ologil, Lomez, Momen, Medowa, Alcasita. My name is Patrick Austin Freeland. I'm Wind Clan of the Cherokee Nation of Oklahoma. My tribal town is Casita. And I think to define traditional ecological knowledge is it's a epistemological noesis that's founded in a socio-ecological context. Just kidding, Mark. You told me not to use $1 million words. I agree with what you all say, especially this idea that it incorporates a certain aspect of spirituality. Spirituality defined as one in recognition of the environment and the surrounding peoples and contexts in the ecology, right? Because I think it can be really easy to compartmentalize our minds. And I hope to talk about a bit more of that in a minute. But to start off, after getting some good feedback from former talks, I want to start off with a dream. And this might be something to also kind of highlight that, right? Because our dreams are essentially unfettered consciousness, right? It is us, but it's... so this is something I'll share. This was from about a week ago. And the title of this dream is called Reverence. In an empty building, I'm setting up ceremonies for folks. I first use cedar in the east with water and place it in a space and invite people to clear their minds. This is the direction to square their thinking and to let negative ideas go. I have to take time to make sure people fully understand, and it's a lot of work. I wake up briefly to gather something and return to the space. I move south, and I am aware that this is not Creekway, but there is contention about that, and I do not fully belong in that space, and arguably no one does. In the south is the place for making arrangements, and we're at an old church. There are lots of elderly people here, and so I'm explaining about dogma and the definitions of a creator God, and how some of these worldviews are incongruous to the nature of these ceremonies. It is snowing here, and I'm preparing a dinner, making some frozen grape and cranberry juice dessert. There's a metaphor here, and I'm a little worried we will not have time to complete the ceremonies. The kids in the hall are performing a live show, and it's about a trans dominatrix, and I worry that this isn't going to fly around these Christians. I'm going to have to leave soon, so I tell people that the rest of the ceremonies are in reverence of life-giving things and reverence itself. I'm sure they'll figure it out. I'm remote driving a vehicle using a 6-degree control system that's a bit nerve-wracking, and I end up getting stuck on the wrong street. Trying to turn around, I end up getting out of the vehicle, but realize the ground is covered in a thick plastic. Something is wrong.
All right, thank you. So think about that a little bit. We come from traditions, I think many of us, Indigenous people, come from traditions where dreams, they're experiences. Now, it's not like this one right here, right now, but they're experiences, and they are taken seriously. And Patrick had shared with me, that the last few months he'd really been thinking about recording his dreams, trying to remember them because they're important. And thank you for sharing that, Patrick. And so I think this is a great topic, just this whole issue of experience. And I'd like to have the audience members think about this. How much of your life experience gets talked about or valued in your formal education? Do you get an opportunity to let teachers know you know something they don't? This is really, really critical. And I want to say something, I want to ask the guest about this, because we all have something to learn from each other. We're going to talk as relatives today because that's what we are. There's where science really comes together with indigenous wisdom, right? What does evolutionary theory tell you? We're all related. What does modern ecology teach you? We're all connected through these relationships. That's modern science. Well, no, that's indigenous wisdom. That's what we've understood since time immemorial. And so this may seem like an odd topic, but I think it has to do with how we solve problems. I'd like to ask, throw out the topic of humility, because one of the things that I've noticed is that I'm a PhD. I went through the university system, and I think sometimes they promote an idea that you're supposed to know it all, and if you don't know it all, for goodness sakes, don't let anyone know that. You know, you got to have you're supposed to have the answer. You've got a PhD. You're supposed to have the answer. Well, I've gotten more and more comfortable after watching my elders with telling students, I don't know. Tough questions. I think that has to do with humility. I'm going to throw that out. What do you guys think about? Talk a little bit about humility in your work. Yeah.
Well, I asked an elder on our campus, Norma Marshall, about that word, "futchdan" in Muskogee way, and I asked her, "What's the boundary between, say, like being humble and then humiliation, right?"
Yeah.
And so the word in English isn't always necessarily the easiest thing to wrap your mind around, but the idea of humility is simple: is you're humble, but you're not weak, right? You're no better than anyone, but you're also no less, right? I think in this world there are going to be a lot of people that will try to place you in a particular hierarchy. You know, it could be because of your age, you know, it could be because of what you know, could be because of like your ethnicity, could be so many things that people try to judge you on. But to truly understand humility, and at least in the way that I know it, is to know that, well, we're all equal here, you know, and we're all, you know, five-fingered holy beings, right? You know, we're here and we have power, right? And so don't let anyone take your power, even your own mind.
For me, it's I learned this from Dan because he's often, and I don't remember who he said this, but we don't care what you know till we know that you care. And I think that that's a really valid thing in today's world where there's such a lack of empathy for one another, that we've become so desensitized to violence. We've become so desensitized to caring, I guess, you know, that we find ourselves in that there's a huge lack of empathy for the earth, for each other, for the animals and plants, because we've become so desensitized. We've lost that somewhere along the line. And I think this is a really good opportunity to talk about caring and what that does for us and what that does for one another. Junior high and high school was the worst time of my life. It was wrought with hostility and violence and chaos, and not just because I grew up in an alcoholic family. So I think school was my safe space. School was where I had an opportunity to show that I had something that was of value. I had creative thought. I was very passionate about being outside because home wasn't exactly safe. So outside was where I fell in love with my environment, with my plants, my trees, my animals. You know, I was lucky enough to have access to a horse as a child, or I would have been in a lot of trouble. That horse taught me to care for something other than myself. And I think that that's something our social construct nowadays, we've become so obsessed with technology, with our cell phones, with video games, with apps, that we've lost touch with how to have healthful conversations with one another. And I think that really translates into how we interact and engage with our environment. And it really affects our humility, our sense of self-worth sometimes. It can degrade it immensely, or it can falsely elevate it to a level that is unrealistic and almost fantasy-ish. So I think we have to be careful, and I think it's a great opportunity for us to find that care within ourselves for our environment, for our favorite places, and find ways to protect them. You know, the rivers you used to be able to drink out of almost any river in the United States. Now you almost can't swim in them. I mean, there's something terribly wrong, and I think that it's going to be your generation that's going to suffer with a lot of ailments. I mean, our generation is sick with, you know, I know so many people with cancer and other physical ailments, and I don't know if it's the water, I don't know if it's the soil, I don't know if it's the air, I don't know if it's all of it. But everybody's got something wrong with them, and I think your generation's really going to be tasked with solving some of these challenges that my parents created. And so with humility, I acknowledge I don't have all the answers. I'm still trying to wade through the questions. I got an education so that I had the agency to stand toe-to-toe with some of these other scientists and say, I disagree with you, what you're doing is wrong. And we cannot technology our way out of every problem. So we need to start looking towards some of the ways that my ancestors and their ancestors have done things. We're not going to be able to go back to the old ways. We're going to have to use the knowledge that we've brought with us along the way and alter it and adjust it and tweak it a little bit to try to find something that works today to solve some of the big issues that you guys are going to be tasked with having to deal with and live with. So I'm grateful you're here because it means that you care or that you were forced to be here.
You probably didn't have a choice. Teacher said you're coming to hear this presentation,
right.
But we're glad you're here.
We're really glad you're here because I'm hoping that something we say goes with you when you leave and makes a little difference in your mind. Thank you.
So humility for me, that's a lifelong journey. And I would like to remind you that humility is about, if I may share, it is about being a forever student. The acronyms, titles, all those different things that come with a contemporary society is not what makes you a good human. There's many elders, including Uncle Dan, that always ask the question, what type of human being do you want to be remembered as? Culturally, your wealth is dependent on not the financial social structures of capitalism, but it's built on how many people can you call on when you need the help, and how many people will call on you when they need help from you. And I would say that humility, grace, empathy, all those are lifelong journeys, right? So as we age, there's certain things that we see with a pattern. There's certain things we explore that's quite new. But being a forever student is about acknowledging that the knowledges that your more than human relatives share with you, even your human relatives share with you, that it comes with a responsibility. Like, so the ask of us to bring ourselves and our ancestors with us comes with a responsibility. So the knowledge has a responsibility, and you should always ask yourselves, are you ready for the responsibility of the knowledge? When you ask that of other people and there's knowledge sharing, are you ready for the responsibility to reshare the knowledge? Because today, once we sell our testament, it is now your responsibility to be those carriers of those stories. And we invite you to do that. The other part of humility for me is always acknowledging to be gentle with yourself, have grace with yourself. Imperfections does not make you a good, imperfections are good things. Society teaches us that imperfections are bad, that we must strive to be perfect, right? And so being a forever student is acknowledging that you wake up every day, it's a new day. It's like an Etch-a-Sketch. Am I dating myself? Do you guys know what an Etch-a-Sketch is? And it's not that you forget the lessons that you've learned. It's that, you wake up, you ask the Creator for the blessings that you need to do your deeds, your good deeds, and you say your prayers in the evening to say thank you for giving me the medicine to share those things. So all of us in this room will have a different definition of humility that is directly connected to your lived experiences. Not one person in this room is going to have the same lived experiences, and that's okay. The other part of humility is being gentle with yourself to bring the layers of yourself that you can bring present. because society demands that we bring all of our layers. That's not healthy, right? So the days that you want to show up with only one layer, maybe a million layers, that is humility and being very gentle and graceful with each other as we're going through our lessons in life. And again, I appreciate you. And so Pilahakwado for coming. I think this is amazing.
Yes, this discussion really reminded me. So we just had a big meeting, organizing meeting about this research hub I was telling you about. And so we've got 4 sites we're working with initially for over 5 years, but we're starting in Alaska. In fact, our dear friends, Fred and Frida Anigawak are probably stuck as we are speaking in Anchorage, because their village on Shizmaroff, that typhoon, the last reports they had is that their airstrip near Shizmaroff had been washed away. Nome's airstrip was under 5 feet of water, okay? And one of our other partners, there's still indigenous people in Puerto Rico, and they were leaving Saturday to go face a hurricane. So if you ask why this work's important, that's why it's important, because it's not abstract what's going on in these people's lives. But one of the other sites we work with is in Hawaii. And we were joined by our dear uncle and elder M. Kalani Sousa. And he has 2 things I always like that he says that really touches on this discussion. One, he always says, Daniel, remember, some minds are always better than one mind. You guys get together. It's not all on your shoulders. Get together, talk about ideas, talk about things you can do together. And then the other thing he says is, you know, you can't love anyone else until you love yourself. And that's hard to do sometimes in this world, where you might be very aware of your shortcomings. None of us are perfect. And then sometimes you might have other people trying to put you down. And I've thought about that a lot, because that is so, both of those ideas are so related. You can't love anyone else till you love yourself. And if you don't love yourself, it's going to be real difficult for you to have honest, healthy relationships with others. We got a whole world that's bound up in some pretty ugly relationships right now. Pretty dysfunctional ways of relating to each other. And so I think part of this indigenous knowledge is really about, and environmental solutions is framing it. You've got to frame the issue and put yourself in that frame and realize, you know, it's not all on your shoulders. Call in your kin. I don't mean just human kin. The plants, the animals, the land, the air, the water. That's a part of our kin too. That ecological thinking that is so powerful. So this time's going way too quickly, but I'm going to throw out this topic because I think it's one that all 3 of our guests have worked with carefully and in a caring way. And so that is the ecology part of TEK. Tell me about how you have taken these ecological insights to inform your life's work and how you approach things, and maybe some of the solutions you've tried, whether those are in social settings, biological settings, institutional settings. TEK is very much needed in institutional settings today, maybe just as much as in this kind of larger biological, ecological environment we're in. So say a little bit about how this ecological lens has kind of helped shape your thinking. Whoever wants to go first. Yeah.
So I might take about a 5-minute wind up.
Okay.
So first, think about how you're thinking and how you're observing. So right now you're looking at me or you're looking at, wherever. Try recognizing that you may be only looking out of one eye, right? Now try purposely looking out of two eyes. Does that feel different? All of a sudden, do you see field of view around? Right? Because you're focusing consciously like, oh, I have two eyes. And so what your brain is literally doing is you're accessing a lot of this information that you would ordinarily confabulate. You wouldn't even know that you're looking at. You just think you are, so therefore your brain's interpreting that you are. So the more conscious you are of a particular situation, the more conscientious you will be. Meaning you'll have more of a context, you'll have more of a relationship with that particular phenomenon, be it human beings, plants, animals, etc. So here's some scary statistics. You ready? So according to the United Nations Development Program, 90% of the world's countries deteriorated in 2021. Now this is following another trend of global deterioration. Our 5 years of gains in this United Nations frame have been overshot because of the deterioration due to climatic change, coronavirus, and global conflict. Now, you can't see that necessarily, right? It's fine here. It's a nice day. It smells nice. There's people around you who look pretty happy for the most part. So we have to recognize that our consciousness also extends beyond our immediate bodies, right? We have this whole internet that connects us to it. So in essence, we're cybernetic individuals, right? So you have to be very mindful of what information that you're taking in. You have to be conscientious of that information. And so this idea that's starting to emerge from the UN and others is been quoted the uncertainty complex, right? Because who's ever been like so unsure about something that you don't even make a decision, right? Maybe you're watching Netflix. You're like, oh, which one of these shows do I want to watch? You're just scrolling, and they're all great, maybe, but you just can't decide. Well, again, we're just a bunch of gorillas doing calculus, right? We can't really necessarily make decisions as easily as that we think we can. So when we think about these big challenges, climate, conflict, contamination, and we think about this idea of an ecology, for a long time, climate change is important, but I've always liked to reframe it as ecological destabilization. Now, in a lot of the Western frames of ecology, it can be very much like a biology focus, but true ecology involves human beings, thus involves the mindsets and what they call epistemics, the way that we view the world around us. So when we have that in mind, we can also understand that our consciousness and collective consciousness plays a role in this ecological system. So if there's an uncertainty, this is a neurological condition. So the more certain we become, in essence, the more our ideas impact and shape our reality. So a lot of times, I think the way that we tend to view our world too, who's ever heard of the M theory, the multiple universes, right? Yeah, it's interesting. It's also kind of I used to think about this too. When something would go bad in my life, I'd say, well, in some other universe, it went really good for that Patrick, and good for him, right? But then I started thinking, well, if that's true, then there's some other universe where it went really bad for Patrick, and oh, that poor bastard. But I don't think that that's how our universe is constructed, and there's a lot of physics that's starting to back that up. Instead, we can recognize the idea of infinite complexity, right? Those Mandelbrot things. You start to pull something apart, and there's just more to it. There's more dimensionality to it. It's kind of like music. You think, oh, what music do you like? Well, you like rock. Well, what genre do you like? And then you can kind of keep going and going and going. Our ideas and our consciousness is the same way. It's infinitely complex. So if we start to, depending on what we focus on, right, or fail to focus on, we can either overlook that complexity, or worse, we can get so tied up in a non-existent reality that we can literally hurt our brains. So the reason that I really kind of point out this idea is that when you recognize this idea of an infinite possibility, that you can also recognize that if we see the world the way an animal does, it can be a very scary place, right? Think of you take a dog out to a park, and there's other dogs, and oh, I don't know if this is a threat. They're always on edge. Well, we're still animals, right? As conscious and as involved in advance as we like to think we are. Well, but the more that you see yourself through like the squirrel's eye or the deer's eye or the frog's eye, the more you also will have empathy for that being. Now, our plants and others, same thing. So remember that these things and screens and TV, they're fun, they're wonderful, they tickle that amygdala just in the right way, but they will rob you of your empathy. You know, all you young ones, right? You know, what are you, in your 20s, early 30s? Nay. But keep that in mind, right? I'm not chastising you. I'm not saying, like, you know, never use these again. These are very powerful tools. But be mindful of what's going into your brains, right? Because that's the thing. You might not see something, but your brain did, right? Well, you can take that same context in this world around you. So I think, the topic was solutions. Mm-hmm. So here's one easy thing that everyone in this room can do is you see all these little plants on the ground, right? At first glance, you're like, oh, what is it? Well, it's grass, or they're weeds, or those are just trees. Well, no, they're different species. There's probably, just in this little patch alone, probably 20 different species. Take the time to learn what they are, because a lot of them aren't weeds. You know, a lot of them are food, a lot of them are medicine, but they're beings. So learn their name, just like the people around you. How awkward is it when you don't know someone's name? You're like, oh, hey, you. But when you take the time to learn their name, you build a relationship with them, and they acknowledge you. And this isn't a metaphor. But if you learn the names of these plants and you learn the names of these animals, especially if you learn some of their native names, because everyone has a tribe. You know, you could be from Europe, could be from wherever. You know, learn that name for those things, and they will literally talk to you. They will acknowledge you back, and you'll understand them, and then you'll see them more. But more importantly, you will care about them. So that's also why it's just as important to learn the names of these peoples around you. I mean, some of you even are cheating. You got the names just like sitting there, right there, right? But do that. You know, that's part of that relationship building, is to first understand who people are. How do they think? Where are they from? What do they care about? Chances are you might care about some of the same things. But ooh.
Ecology for me is lived in my everyday, I think most readily as diversity. You know, when Patrick talked about the grass under your feet probably being up to 20 different species of plants that make up this lawn, that it's true. And, you know, all these different trees are different. They have different needs from the soil. They exchange with the trees and plants around them, different chemicals. They communicate through vibrations in their roots, through chemical releases and absorptions. It's really fascinating when you start understanding the interrelationship that plants have with each other. And I think that is or should be true with us as human beings as well. You know, recognizing that sameness is unhealthy. When you get into like monotheistic anything, when everything is singular, you run the risk of a disease wiping an entire species out. And so when there are multiple species, you have diversity within a species, then you have opportunity to survive catastrophic events. And I think climate change has a very similar thread to it. The more diverse thinking we have, the more diverse experiences we bring to the conversation, the more worldview, epistemologies, our worldview, our ontology, how we know things to be, and what, you know, what's out there and how do we know. Those things are important, especially when each of us have different experiences and different needs. And when we're sensitive to each other's needs, because we've had conversations and know each other's needs, the opportunity to survive catastrophic events go up exponentially. Mm-hmm. So it's really important that we take the time to give a crap about each other because it's going to be those moments of traumatic event like the hurricane in Puerto Rico, the typhoon up in Alaska, that when we come together as a community, we can help each other survive. And I think it's really important that diversity of plants matters. Diversities of animals matters. Diversity of humans matter. Just because we're different doesn't make us less. It actually makes us more. And I think that's an incredibly valuable point that I hope you take away today is your individualism is unique and it is precious and your voice matters because there's nobody else that has experienced certain things the way you might have. And that one experience could change could change an entire event for the better. So be conscientious of yourself, but also be conscientious of others.
I would say that the ecological experience for me is about frequency. So I go back to the spirituality of knowledges, the spirituality of who we are, and the ways in which we navigate spaces with our more than human relatives, and water spirits, air spirits, the soils that are spirits as well, is that each of you have a frequency. So all of our more than human relatives also have frequencies. And when we're in these settings, we're sharing frequency. Right? Mm-hmm. So how do we acknowledge the ecological consciousness of your frequencies and the frequencies of our more than human relationships? It's about rebalancing, recalibrating our frequencies so that we're on the same frequency, right? Mm-hmm. So we know that when someone's having a really bad day, their frequency could be 150, but the aspiration really is 1,000, right? That's like the creator. That's like everybody that's in the stars and making their journey to the stars. So how do we recalibrate ourselves so that our frequencies with our more than human relationships are similar? They shouldn't be identical. We should never aspire to be identical. We should aspire, as Paulette and Patrick talked about, our unique consciousness. So that's one thing that I'm consistently thinking about. When I think about ecological consciousness and particularly solutions, it really isn't about creating this doom and gloom about needing to do these things with urgency. Right. It really is about going back to the place of love. Like, how do we find love? What does love mean to you? How do we do that in a community? How do we move beyond the word community and redefine that to family, to relationships? And then how do we find the grace to allow people who are not ready to learn the lessons they should learn to learn them in their own time? I'm really, get a little nervous how society creates this urgency for everyone, and it creates anxiety. Anxiety equals to depression. Depression equals to a feeling of despair and that there's no other place to go or turn, and so you feel suffocated. So if we can figure out ways to bring artwork back into our conversations, to bring music back into our conversations, to take the classroom outside and not think in a box, but learn outside of a box, but make it multi-generational. So the thing for me, that ecological consciousness, is how many elders do you actually have visiting your classrooms? How many elders of your family or nearby communities actually come and share that wisdom with you? Mm-hmm. And believe it or not, the little people, as I like to say, the tiny ones, and our elders help calibrate our frequencies. They help put us back into place. So when I'm in settings, whether it's in higher institutes of education or these very organic settings, I like to remind myself, to remind others and myself, that what I put out, you feel, right? There's a reason why many of us around people, and we go, ooh, right? We don't want to go, ooh. We want to go, hey, how are you doing, right? We want to do, hey, and so it's about how to recalibrate ourselves to be able to do that. And we can work on solutions, right, with our hearts to acknowledge that nothing's perfect. Exactly. We will never have a solution for everything. And that's what the Creator is trying to recalibrate us to remember, is that all of us have to come together. More minds are better than one, as Uncle Wildcat has said.
Yeah, I think, this is a great place to kind of jump into indigenuity because, this was something that was floating around. I've told the story many times, but we've got a new audience. Back about 2004, 2005 on my campus, I teach in the Indigenous and American Indian Studies program, and we're very interdisciplinary. I like to think of myself as transdisciplinary. I pull from everything: biology, poetry, music, chemistry. It's all related. Okay, it's all related. Good music will do a lot for your chemistry. You guys know it. It feels good. Put a smile on your face. Makes you want to move your feet. That's chemistry. That's physiology, man. That's your electrical, chemical system in your body kicking in. And sometimes if you're an old guy like me, I've got that music I like to put on when I really want to chill out and just relax, okay? So I've got some music I'll put on for that. But I want to hear a little bit about your three's thought on this idea that indigenuity is this idea of putting indigenous wisdom, knowledge together with ingenuity, and what we get is indigenuity. We've lived too long for thinking that our cultures and our life ways are all about the past. No, we're right here today. And I'm still trying to embody Zoyaha ways and wisdom and knowledge. And I think one of the things that I'd like each of our panelists to share about is about this idea of indigenuity and how they kind of think of it and maybe have used it in their work. Whoever wants to go first. Okay.
So yeah, and something I do want to follow up on that is again this, we had been talking about consciousness, and I think that's pretty key to that, that idea of indigeneity, right? Because it's from a place, so you have to have a context within that particular place. But here's the interesting: who's ever said, "Oh, I suck at math," right? Well, do you ever think about why you say that, right? Because Well, no, you're telling yourself that for sure. In math, it's not so much that it's inherently hard. I mean, everyone in this room has the ability to do it well. But think of the classroom space and where you had to learn that. It might have been like really taxing. It's like 8 o'clock in the morning. The teacher's mean. My old book. So when you're like, you feel that kind of like frustration even thinking about it. It hurts and you feel it in your head. You're like, oh, that hurts. Well, that's called vigilance, right? Your brain is literally going into this kind of like, they call it that fight or flight mode. And when you're in that state, higher order thought is really, really hard to do. And so if you're struggling in math to this day, it's probably because you're threatened somehow, right? And so a lot of times when I would work with students or others, the idea is we'd have to take the time to unpack that. And I think that in a lot of indigenous cultures, there's this idea of ceremony. Well, ceremony isn't necessarily ritual. Well, it is, but it's not necessarily like this dogmatic, ritual. What it really is designed to do is to purify your mind. You're in this place. You're like, okay, I know as these human things, I have to unpack this ugly and this negativity, and then we have different plant medicines and songs and things that can help do that. But it's really to put our minds in the right way. And so that we're aligned in this way that we're able to think of these higher order thoughts, these higher conscientious thoughts, these interconnected ways of being. And so I think a lot of the indigenuity is rediscovering ceremony within our lives, whatever that means to you. All of your peoples, plural. You come from, no matter where you are on this planet, has something. You might even have a novel tradition, like a morning ritual. Like when I get up, I like to listen to music when I shower. Right? That's a ceremony. Right? But the point being, it's very personal to who you are as human beings. And so there's many contexts in indigenuity, but I would say you have to start with that idea. You have to start with humbling yourself to this, and this higher power doesn't have to be some kind of like God or something like that. A higher power could literally be the sky above you, the trees around you, the greater existence and the greater consciousness. So I would say start that. Rediscover your ceremonies. Ooh.
Indigenuity for me, I mean, it comes with a lot of things. I've always been taught you feed the heart, right? And so in a lot of settings, particularly in classroom settings, I'm always bringing snacks to class. And by third week, everybody's bringing snacks to class. And then by fourth week, I have to say, calm down the snacking because I can't hear you. But it's creating family, right? Yeah. And I tell people all the time, look around you. That's your network for the future. And always pay attention to that. The indigenuity for me as well is to always, pre-COVID, if I was in person having a class, I would always ask my students to go outside with me to reground ourselves. We take our socks and shoes off, and I honor that. That's how I ground myself. There's a reason why when humans walk through a path of trees and grass, they feel better. I think it's very ego-driven to go, oh, I feel better because I exercise. No, you feel better because those relationships are with our plant relatives. They knew exactly what you needed, and so they shared it with you, right? It's those types of things. But indigenuity for me is also acknowledging that society hasn't always honored what I have to bring into a space. The indigenuity for me is playing the game Matrix. So telling everyone what the code is, right? And then giving people a choice to take the red or blue pill. And the code really is about, you know, like telling someone, no, it's not necessary for you to regurgitate what someone else tells you to be successful in a classroom or an academic setting. Indigenuity is asking people, as we say, keep your moccasins tied tight. Own who you are. All the things that come with you that day. But to me, it is reminding people that, you know, humans are the most fragile beings on the planet, right? And when I look at the old school food pyramid, I'm dating myself again, along with the Etch-a-Sketch. The food pyramid says that human beings are directly at the top, when we really should be at the bottom. Like everything we have on came from something else, right? Other than your hair and your skin. And so indigenuity is just reminding people, you know, every day is a new day. And we always have to lean into that, right? How do we lean into that? And so we were talking about, we were in Montreal together, and an elder from Montreal talked about the 3 Fs. They're not profanity words. You know, or was it 3 Fs? Was it flight? No, it's fight, freeze, or something else he said. But I like to teach freezing. Like learn how to lean into the moment. And he shared a lesson that everything that you go through, you have to let it pass through, because if not, it stays in your consciousness. Acknowledge that everything you experience is going to pass through. But when you hold on to those things, like you're consistently triggered, right? Patrick talked about, ooh, math, right? I say, yay, math. I love numbers. But, you know, those types of things. So to me, being in that auntie mode, it's like, it's okay. It really is. Everything will be fine. And that's also indigenuity.
First, I want to start off with, don't let that gray hair fool you. He was a rocker back in the day. He listened to some good old-fashioned rock and roll. Indigenuity for me is the ability to question and explore. Because we can question everything, but that never gives you a solution or any answers. But if you explore, then you can find many answers sometimes. There's not always just a singular answer. The world is not binary, and it clearly is not black and white. It is every color, that you see, and colors you don't. So we just need to remember that there are, you know, that we are beings that have a relationship with place. We have favorite places that we love to go, whether it's a man-made space or a natural space. There are places we just dig being, and it feels good to be there. Indigenuity is exploring for more places like that bring us happiness, more places that give us joy, more places that ground us, more places that give us a sense of security, a sense of wholeness, a sense of safety or security. Again, indigenuity is the ability to explore your surroundings, finding the diverse beings that make up a place, finding and making relationships with them, getting to know them, you know, getting to know their name, getting to know their characteristics, getting to know their medicine or their edible properties, you know, when to eat them, what parts to eat, what kind of, you know, medicine, what kind of gifts is that thing giving you that nourishes your body and gives you health, gives you strength, gives you well-being. You know, there's all kinds of things in our environment that we've lost touch with that we don't even know are edible anymore. Like, you know how many people poison the heck out of dandelions but will pay big bucks at the grocery store for them? It's ridiculous. We've gotten so out of touch with our environment that if COVID should have taught us something, that our environment is far more nurturing than it is unforgiving, that we should have gotten more outside during COVID and got, you know, away from the inside where we're all trapped together, but gotten outside to explore, to find out what is edible, what is medicine, how to use it. I mean, our lives would be so much more enriched if we had a better understanding of our environment and how that relationship can be.
Awesome, awesome. You can see why I told you this would be a fun conversation to be in. And, it made me think of something, and it kind of going back to something you've all touched on, but the world is not binary. And so don't let anyone ever tell you that being a scientist means you should not care, not have empathy, not feel for something. No, I don't think so. And they're always telling you, well, you've got to be objective. Well, objectivity is a lens, too, you put on. It just means we all agree about this is objective. There are things that are real, and we can study it, like the soil, like those grasses. But I think the thing about indigenuity that's so important to understand, it is a lens that says we do so respectfully. We do so honoring, that different than those different than human persons. And in many of our traditions, we do grant personhood to the wind. Patrick's a part of a very powerful clan among the Muskogee, and if you're sitting out here in 90-degree heat, you probably know why the wind was such a powerful clan. Boy, that breeze sure feels good when you catch it on a day like this. The wind clan. The wind will tell you when the weather's going to change. It's a messenger, okay? And so that's kind of interesting. And I want to say something about ceremony and about math, okay? I've got to say this because I had trouble with math. My son had trouble in math, and the breaking point was, I think, the first fall term of it's either 7th or 8th grade, I forget, but that's when they started algebra. Now he's 44 years old now. You guys are probably starting it in 5th grade or something, I don't know. But anyway, back in the day when he was in junior high, and he'd come home and he says, Dad, I just can't do this. I can't do this. And I'm saying, sit down, don't panic, and think through it. And he was just having a horrible time. And the end of the semester came, and I told him, I said, well, listen, it's only 5 weeks long. Let's do summer school just in math. Change teachers. He had this teacher. At the end of summer school, I meet with his teacher, and she goes like, so I was told Haken was having trouble with algebra. And I said, yeah, he got a D in it. She says, he didn't have any trouble with algebra. He's one of the best students in the class. And I said, what? And I found out, in this class, how many teachers do we have in here? Okay, raise your hand. Don't be afraid. Okay. Well, the truth of the matter is, I'm going to tell you something. You're all teachers. Every one of you's a teacher. Because people will watch you, how you conduct yourself, how you live, and they're going to learn something. Parents, we all know this, right? We tell our students, you have that great realization when your kids learn logic, and, over dinner, you're trying to tell them, no, you can't do that. And you said, but Dad, you said. And then they start using logic, against you. But I found out the problem was that he had a teacher who really wasn't that excited about teaching algebra. And he'd just say, okay, I'm going to put it on the board, now copy what I did. No explanation. And it needed explanation. Well, this woman took the time to explain. And I had a similar experience, and I like math now, okay? And it's really cool. I'm still not the best mathematician, but I did get through my graduate school economics course, and that was the toughest course I ever took, doing those curves, and oh my gosh, it was tough. But 8th grade, I was just like my son. And so this is for all the teachers in this classroom. And I was doing horrible. And I can tell you the woman's name. Her name was Mrs. Culver. And Mrs. Culver pulled me aside one day and says, Dan, do you bring your lunches to school with you? And I said, yes. She said, do you mind just hanging out here in my classroom? And I want to, she says, I know you're having trouble, but I think you just need more exercise at doing this. And I knew, I thought, okay, this is cool. So I brought my lunches, and Mrs. Culver would stay there over lunch, her lunch hour. She'd brought her lunch, I'd brought my lunch, and we'd do math. And at the end of the semester, I was at the top of the class. Now, if she hadn't done that, I would have been at the bottom of the class, and I wouldn't have advanced on to the next advanced math course. Don't tell yourself you suck at math. It's about here, and it's about getting maybe a little different lens on it, okay? And so my point is basically to say is that try to take advantage of the opportunities that come up to you in your formal education, like these three have. Always remember there's a lot to learn outside the walls of your classroom. You've got a lot of relatives that are waiting to teach you. I wish you guys could have heard May Hay this morning. She's an indigenous gardener and made a great lunch for some of us inside. And she kept talking about, you know, I had to learn the language of the plants. I had to learn the language of the earth. And she says, you know, they don't speak English. But she was literally saying, you can learn their language if you pay attention. They've got things to teach you. The earth does, the soil. Those plants have things to teach you. But this goes back to I think the point all three have made. It's about being mindful about the world we're in, paying attention, caring. Our great-great-grandparents didn't ever have classrooms. They never sat through a lecture like this, but they learned a lot. How did they learn it? By living, by watching, by observing. I think that's ultimately the source of indigenuity, and it's all around us. We just have to become mindful. We have to care. We have to pay attention. Okay, so I do have to comment on this because Paulette happens to know a little bit of my history. When I was your age, now I'm dating myself too, I got to tell you, I was planning to be the next Jimi Hendrix. Now, it didn't turn out. I don't have to tell you that. It didn't turn out, but I played in a rock band all through high school and everything. And you know what? I think about that experience now, and I think it shaped my scientific work today. I love to improvise, but you can't be good at improvisation unless you know the basics. You got to know chemistry. You got to know some physics. You got to know some math, and then you guys can rock it. And we've left you some terrible problems to solve. And so, last question for everyone. What gives you hope? I know Michelle's already kind of touched on it, but just start with Paulette. Paulette, what gives you hope?
You guys, honestly.
Awesome.
The next generation up and coming, because I have to put my faith in something. And so I have hope that this next generation won't be so swayed by what they see on television, what you hear in the media, that you'll make some of your own decisions, and that you'll investigate what you're hearing to find out your own truth. And there can be, there's truth is subjective, and how you are raised and how you have grown and your own experiences influence how you see a question, how you approach, how you want to answer that question, how you come up with an answer, and then how you communicate that to your peers. You know, so it's really, really important that you each take the time to not just be told something, but to investigate what you're being told and find out all of the angles of it. Find out the both sides, because you want to understand the other side that you're fighting against sometimes, so that you better understand where they're coming from, so that you can either defend yourself or switch sides. Sometimes we're wrong, and we get so solidified in our opinion that we don't want to listen to other facts. And I think it's important that this generation doesn't get caught up in accepting at face value what you're being told in social media, being told in the mainstream media, being told, hear with more than just your ears and eyes, hear with your heart. Be willing to investigate a question or a problem further and really understand what you're actually dealing with, because it could be slightly different, or you can be given a bunch of really bogus information and you making opinion off of a falsehood. So I think I have so much hope in this next generation not being so blind, not being so fooled into believing what one person is telling you. Look at all the aspects, look at all the sides, consider all the facets of what makes a gemstone sparkle, because all those beams of light are going to give you a different perspective.
This is a tough one. So I feel like, being a idealistic, optimistic young person, had always so much like hope and ambition and prospects for the future, and then just it seemed like this line after line of just, ugly things happening, and people getting in the way, people driving in the left-hand lane slower than the speed limit, like all this stuff. Just so I feel like I've been rejecting nihilism for years now. This idea, it'd be so much easier if nothing meant anything. This is all just pointless, right? Nothing matters. Feels good to say, but it's not true, right? Because there's something in there that just can't believe it. But and hope is hard, right? Because it leads to heartbreak sometimes. You have such hope for others in the future and what can happen, and for yourself, and so like that's why a lot of times people say there's such an occurrence of depression, is because we're mourning our these futures that have died. We had this great ambition, right? But realistically, what gives me hope now is like maybe the good bow on this present here is my relationships, right? Just like on the way here, my motorcycle was having some problems. I was like, well, crap, how am I going to get there? But then, Paulette and everyone just texted and was like, hey, can I catch a ride? And sure, and it was, that was good. And I saw my cousins over the weekend, and then they had all their little kids, and everyone's just happy. So it was good to see them. A good friend of mine, Mia Torres, just texted me. It's like, hey, do you want to come with our family to the zoo in October? I'm like, yeah, that sounds like fun. My other friend Gabi, she's like, hey, we got this grant. People come in with these grants for our music club, and little things like that. That I have people out there that love me, and I love them too. And that's a hard one, right? These people text me all the time, I love you, and I'm like, I don't know what to do with this. I'll put the little heart emoji. That makes it easier, right? Because I just, But at the same time, because that word means a lot to me. If I tell you I love you, Jesus Christ, that means I'm going to die for you, maybe. But yeah, I guess that's what gives me hope. So that, despite the, in Muskogee beliefs, like this world is this boundary between, the divine and the profane, right? And so you got to take it in stride. You find that balance. But when I guess, I just get hopeful when there's like people out there that reciprocate what I feel, and even negative, right? If someone treats me bad because I'm treating them bad, I'm like, good. I'm being an asshole right now. I need that check in this life. So that's helpful. Oh.
Hope for me is that one of the lessons, people don't like to talk about this, but I'm just going to bring it up. One of the lessons that we should be grateful for in this pandemic when we were all isolated is that we as human beings, regardless of your age, had to learn how to reflect. So the first time probably in your lives, you had to flip the mirror back on yourselves and sit with yourself. So what did you see? What did you not see? So my hope is that one of the lessons that we've learned is that our more than human relatives, our Mother Earth, is very powerful, right? Mm-hmm. And so we were given an opportunity to reflect. And so we always have to ask ourselves, when we look in the mirror, did we reflect long enough? Do we need to continue to reflect? And how do we reflect? So my hope is that each of you, all of us, will learn how to recalibrate to be emotional human beings again. And to understand that it's okay to not bring all of our layers with us. But that my hope is that we'll get back to the emotional part of things, right? And as my family has always said, question, acknowledge your consciousness, and always ground yourself. Always ground yourself. Sometimes we go too fast because society said we must do that. But we shouldn't copycat everything everyone does anyway, correct, right? My dad used to say, if so-and-so jumped off the bridge, are you going behind them? And I was like, Dad, you roll your eyes up in your head. It's like, my dad's nuts, right? But now I get what he's saying. And so I just ask you to try to recalibrate yourselves to be more emotional. And it's okay to be sad. It's okay to be angry. It's okay to be joyous. It's okay just not want to feel. All those things are okay. And so that's my hope. And when you get to that point, when we start talking about heavy problems that need very complex solutions, we can calibrate ourselves and with unique steps try to find the same rhythm, just to know that all things take time.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. I've got hope because there's the Museum of Native American History in Bentonville, Arkansas, that has created a space for marvelous things like this. And I've got hope because they run a contest with the Fall Festival every year. And next year, I'm looking to see what you're going to submit for the Indigenuity contest, because one of you may have that knowledge, that wisdom that could really help us solve some of the really pressing problems we're facing. That gives me hope. Sanlay, Yagasada.
Ooh.
We want to thank you all for coming out. We also want to thank Tribal Voices for sponsoring this panel today. Yahui. This is the beginning. Coming up next is, through the interweb, Indigenous science, how we can transform the world with the Carolyn and Ora Smith Foundation for Indigenous Girls and Women in STEM. And also there is just a full day of meet and greets. It's all for you guys tomorrow. I mean, you go snag these people. Don't say snag, but I watch Reservation Dogs. I know what's going on. Grab them and, have a conversation with them. We didn't have time for Q&A. Oh, shut up. Anyway, tomorrow there is going to be a short film festival at the Quapaw Nation here. All of this is free for you to come. And Arkansas Arts Academy, we had the fabulous Michael B. Gay, who is a Dene composer that's working with you all. And we will have Larry Mitchell, a Grammy Award-winning guitarist, that will have a concert with Michael, and also the Arkansas Arts Academy. And there is a full roster of fabulous things. The next panel, we will... all of this is recorded, and it's all for you educators and students of all ages, and we hope we make the Museum of Native American History's website a resource. I am told by this lady over there that's making lemonade and shaved ice, and I know it's hot today, go see her. And also, we've been through HE double hockey sticks, so you can get your latest COVID booster. We want to thank the Arkansas Health Department. Go get them. Mister, you've got a contest to judge. The one just came in from Seattle. So thank you all for being out in the heat. And I hope you'll go over to the museum and cool off a little bit. And we see you again tomorrow. Or today. Or stick around. Thank you all. Thank you.